So, Robert, you're a former ambassador to NATO. Does it look likely that Putin's war, his invasion of Ukraine, is going to have paid off, at least in part?
Well, it's always good to talk. And one of our problems, we haven't been talking enough to them. They haven't been talking enough to us. We need to recognize that Russia is not going to go away. For a number of years, going back under a couple of administrations of different parties, there's been a pretense that somehow Russia's going to disappear. We've got this war, but it's not the only thing there. There's going to need to be some coming to terms with the Russians of a future relationship, of which ending the war in Ukraine is going to be part of it.
So Zelensky's going to have to give up some land.
He's probably going to have to give up the Crimea in any event. Nobody really wants Crimea. It really wasn't Ukrainian, except by accident. But the real way of working at this, it's been clear for years, is that Ukraine gets sovereignty over all the territory, and then the areas which are Russian-speaking, Russian culture, get a lot of autonomy. That is possible, but it's going to take a while. It's not going to take place, as Trump says, between now and the inauguration.
Matthew.
It's not going to take place soon thereafter, but it's going to take place.
Yeah, and I do think that's a real question, is whatever agreement is gotten, whatever negotiated peace we get, does that actually preserve Ukraine's independence and control over its own territory and its nascent democracy, or does it simply make Ukraine part of Putin's sphere of influences, which is clearly something he wants?
And going back quickly to you, Robert, if the US pulls out of its support for Ukraine under Trump, do you see any scenario where the rest of NATO, the rest of the EU can pick up the slack?
Well, first, I don't think Trump's going to pull out all support for Ukraine. He can't afford to as president of the United States, because that would undercut what NATO and others are doing. He's got to work with the allies, and I think he really does understand the importance of NATO, despite things he's said and things he has done. But there's going to need to be a recognition that Ukraine is really in between West and East, a thoroughly Western country, economically, politically, democracy, but a neutral country as between Russia and NATO. The idea that Ukraine will sometime join NATO is a non-starter. It takes unanimity, 32 votes, and that's never going to happen. That's been a false promise made to Zelensky.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.